Hey guys, Richard here with Richard C. Howard and Associates and the Government Sales Momentum Podcast. Today we're going to walk through the federal sales cycle, and this is going to be good for new companies that are thinking about selling to the government, as well as companies that have been doing it for a while, maybe looking to improve the way you're doing things, or if you're struggling, I think this will shed some light. So what we're going to go through first is a misnomer. This is how, especially newer businesses or people thinking about doing this for the first time, or companies that aren't selling anything, view the process. They see a solicitation, it matches the product or service that they provide. They say, hey, great, we're going to write a proposal on this, submit it to the government, and we're going to win that contract. But the reality of the situation is, if that's how you're approaching government sales, you're winning at best 10% of your contracts, probably far less than that. It's probably 1% or no percent if you're just writing proposals on solicitations and submitting them. Now, there are caveats to this. You certainly could win something that way. You might get lucky, but the way companies that are doing this over and over again, meaning repeated sales to the government, is they are influencing requirements before that solicitation ever comes out. They're developing a relationship with the program office. They are responding to RFIs and sources sought. They are suggesting to the government, hey, this is how you should make this purchase. These are the requirements on the product that you're going to buy, or the certifications that the personnel that are doing the work for you should have. Basically, you're doing anything that you can to put your company in a better position to win. And the more you do that up front, the more likely you're going to win. Now, I put, hey, you're 25 times more likely to win. I think it's actually a lot higher than that. And in fact, very, very rarely am I going to recommend to a client that they put a proposal in on something that they haven't influenced. There are times, there are caveats to this, but as a general rule, this is the case. Now, first step for any company when you are looking to sell to the government is make your go, no-go decision. Does the government buy what you sell? How much of it do they buy? Before you go out and get a GSA contract or start writing proposals or even think about this, you need to know that there's enough money that the government's spending in your particular industry, in your niche, to make it worth your while. And everything's public as far as government sales are concerned. So you can know the exact amount, like what is the average amount of or contract value for your industry? How much are they spending each year? Which agencies are actually, and this goes to number two, actually making those purchases. So once you identify that the government does buy what you sell, and they probably do, because the US government, they say, is the biggest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And if that's not true, it's pretty damn close. The next thing you need to do is figure out your contract strategy. And what I mean by that is, okay, they buy what you sell, but you're not just writing proposals on every solicitation you see. In fact, I think at this point, that's the wrong way to approach this. You need to develop relationships with the agencies that actually make purchases in your field, whether it's cybersecurity or airplane repair, or even if you're mowing lawns, doing contract work, if you're in construction, whatever it is that you do, you need to know who makes those purchases in the government. If you're in construction, it's probably the Army Corps of Engineers. If it's cybersecurity, it's everybody, but you got to have a focus. So who buys what you sell? Who are you targeting, and how do they buy what you sell? That's the second question you need to ask, because there's a lot of different ways to make purchases in the government. So once you know, hey, I'm targeting the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center and these particular acquisition shops, because they're the contracting shops that are actually making purchases. Because keep in mind, when you're selling to the government, 99.9% of the time, the user of what you sell will never, ever be able to make a purchase from you. It's especially with the larger contracts. It's always going to be a contracting officer, a program manager, and an acquisition shop, and they're probably not even co-located with the user. Okay, so you need to know that. Which contracting shop makes those purchases? How do they make them? Do they use GSA? If they do and they use it a lot, you might need a GSA contract. But if they don't, if it's under 10%, you don't need that, at least not right away. Do they use other vehicles? Do they make direct purchases, simplified acquisitions? What set-asides do they rely on? All of this is going to dictate who you approach and how you approach government sales. And without knowing this, you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money. So, hey, you know who buys what you sell. You know how they make purchases. You're aligning yourself with those purchases. And what's the next step? Well, now we have to identify opportunities and build your pipeline in those organizations. That can be done with bid matching tools. That can be done by the owner of the company or somebody on his team. That can be done with someone like myself and my team to do that for you. But what you're going to need to do is, first of all, focus on opportunities before they become solicitations, RFIs, which is a request for information, sources sought. Remember, if you're targeting those, the handcuffs are off. You can suggest ways that the government can make purchases. You can suggest set-asides. You can suggest anything that you want to. But once that RFP comes out, the request for proposal, their hands are tied. You're not suggesting anything. All you can do is write a proposal at that point, and it better be exactly the way that they want it, or they might not even read the entire thing. So opportunity ID. You can do this through bid matching tools. You can do this through acquisitions forecasts, reviewing those. Conferences are a great way. Government conferences. There's a difference between industry-based conferences where there's not a lot of government personnel and government-sponsored conferences where you're going to have 1,000 government members walking around, which would have the ability to either generate requirements, make purchases, or actually use what you have. But you could find out about a lot of opportunities in those places, webinars in your target agency. So you see, there's a lot of ways to find out about those opportunities and build your pipeline, but you've got to be able to do that. Now, influencing opportunities. Once you find out about those opportunities, it doesn't just end with replying to a source's SOD or having a meeting at a conference. You need to set up business development meetings with those offices. Really start figuring out the details of what does the government need, right? Because your job, and when I was an acquisitions program manager, all I cared about when a company came into my office was, can they solve my problem? And if they didn't even know what my problem was, the meeting was over before it started. I'm not there to listen to what your set-asides are. That government person is there to hear about what you can provide, how you can solve their problem. So you better be prepared for that. And that's a huge thing, getting those meetings, learning how you can help and solve the government problem sets, because that is going to help you tremendously when you have to write a proposal. You're going to understand the nuance of what the government needs. It's very, very important. Next, we're looking at response assembly. So someone has to write your RFI, source of SOT responses. Someone has to write your white papers. Eventually, someone has to write your proposals. Whether that's somebody on your team or an expert, you need to figure out how you're going to go about that. But that is the next stage in the process. And by the way, all of this is happening before the solicitation comes out. So you can see here, there are a lot of steps you need to go through. Formal engagement, meaning now you've got to submit your either, whether it's an RFI or a white paper, a SBIR submission, which I cover in some of my podcasts and videos. Setting up your accounts, making sure that you're communicating with the small business office. Formal engagement has a lot of steps, and someone has to be managing that for you. So that's somebody on your team that's actually doing that. And doesn't stop after that. You know, once you spend all this time influencing, you need to follow up, make sure they got your response. See, is there anything, were you on your mark? Did you miss something? Additionally, you need to make sure that you keep an eye out for the eventual solicitation. You don't want to do all of this work and then miss the solicitation when it comes out, right? So the next step is the solicitation itself, having a proposal team, somebody that actually understands, hey, you know, this is what a compliance matrix looks like. This is what the FAR clauses stand for. You need to know what you're signing up for, and you need to write that proposal. It's very exacting. And if you mess it up, you're not going to win. Even if you've done all of this influencing ahead of time, if you miss some of the core requirements of the solicitation, then it's going to be one of your competitors that wins and not you. So you don't want to be in that game. So make sure you're paying attention to that and you're hiring the right people. You have to submit the proposal, right? And you want to give yourself enough time, because a lot of times the accounts that you register for, like a good example is if you're putting in SBIR submissions, STTR submissions. If you're doing that with the Department of Defense, you're probably submitting that through a website called DSIP. And DSIP is world renowned for failing the day that all of the submissions are due and crashing. So you want to make sure you're submitting ahead of time, giving you enough time to do that, knowing that there are those type of technological problems. So if you're going to the last minute, you might not even be able to submit, because sometimes it is more than just sending an email. And then finally, contract award. So that was the 6 to 12 month cycle and 10 steps up to contract award. And it can take longer than that. It can be a little bit smaller than that, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what is involved there. Now, how can you save time here, right? And this is the last point I'm going to make on this slide. Conference attendance is actually very powerful. Now, we'll take clients to a conference where we have a network and we have business developers. We'll set up a booth and we're bringing decision makers, requirements generators. If it's the military, we're talking about colonels that are on staff that can set aside money, that can develop requirements, general officers that know big picture, hey, we're looking for these type of technologies, the users of, you know, whether it's a software you have or a product that will actually use it, because the users will generate the need to the requirements folks, right? And then the contracting staff actually could put you on contract. In a conference, all of these people often are in the exact same place. So what you can do is, instead of spending months trying to set up meetings with the different users' requirements and contracting folk, if you find a good conference and you set it up right, you bring the right people there with the right network, you could save a lot of time. You could see going from 2 to 8 in relative speed versus having to set up these meetings and you're cold calling and emailing. And there's a lot of different ways to exploit a network and try to get your foot in the door with the government. But hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about what the process is, everything that's involved before the solicitation and how you can expedite that. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thanks.